static numbers. And to help us break down these numbers and, of course, what they actually mean for you, we're joined in studio by Jim McPhee. He's a lecturer at Strathmore University. Dr. thank you very much for having or finding time to be with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And Winnie Kimotho is the tax manager at PKF. Winnie, thank you very much indeed for your time. I want to start with you, Winnie. What do you make of this budget, this highlights by Ambassador Kuyatani?
Given that I'm a tax person, my first insights into the budget would be that we're looking forward to aligning our tax laws to what is international best practice. So if you look at more like the income tax proposals, they're all, aligned to what is the international best practice. So we're looking forward to introducing reporting regulations. We're looking forward to capping the interest so that we can ensure that there's no base erosion and of the tax base and profit shifting to other countries. So it's more like we're just aligning our interest to what is international best practice, just to ensure that we tax correctly in Kenya. That would be my take home. And also it's a budget that's looking more of incentivizing part of the local manufacturers in Kenya. To what extent it's yet to be seen because we are yet to feel the effects of it. But more like so, it's like we're trying to build back, as they're saying, but with more incentivization into the local sector through the tax measures that have been put forth, and more so with a focus to the health sector. Yes.
And, looking at taxation measures, I mean, do you feel there is a deliberate effort to try and broaden or widen the tax bracket?
Oh yes, mostly for the digital economy. As you know, it's been a nightmare all over the world of how you're going to tax the digital economy. So of course, there's a deliberate effort for us to tax the digital economy and to ensure that everyone is brought to the tax net and to pay their fair share of revenues. As well, if you look at it, we're also looking forward to taxing multinationals who are usually highly geared, because they invest a lot of debt, and to a certain extent, the interest is going to be deductible. So we are trying to limit just how much they're going to get out as part of their revenue in terms of the economic activities that they're going to conduct in Kenya by limiting the interest that they've actually earned. On another note is that for me, the general outlook of it is that it's also tending to go deeper other than broadening the tax base, because if you look, we still want to tax the person who has been heavily taxed. We still want to tax more. Yeah, that would be my perspective.
We'll be coming back to that, to try to understand how the government plans to, tax the taxed more. What about you, Jim?
Well, I always feel that when we talk about the tax base, we're always thinking about income tax. When I used to work in Ernst & Young many years ago, the top rate of income tax was 70% in Kenya. Now, why is it only 30% now? Well, one of the reasons is that we've got VAT. I think we've got to keep in mind that our rate of VAT is lower than that in Uganda. Ours is 16%, Uganda is 20%. So that's the first thing I think that we've got to keep in mind. But you've got to remember that Wanjiku, whenever she buys a bar of soap, whenever she buys some Omo, whenever she buys whatever it is, she is actually paying tax. So although we are all the time talking about broadening the tax base, in fact, this year VAT income is going to go from 395 billion to 473 billion, an increase of 20%. Now, what you're doing actually is you're broadening the tax base in that way. And okay, it's difficult for some, and I know that we're struggling, the whole economy is struggling at the moment because of the COVID-19 business. But the fact is, I think we've got to understand, if we want, for example, roads, if we want schools, if we want hospitals, someone has got to pay for it. And it's either going to be this generation or the next generation. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So we've got to understand, okay, we're borrowing, and in fact, one of the biggest item in our budget at the moment is interest on government debt, which is 561 billion. Okay, the biggest single item. The next item down is the amount that goes to the counties, which is about 410 billion. But I think it's important to keep in mind here that people, on the one hand, we will say, well, this road, what's the state of the road, etc., etc., etc. But on the other hand, we then say, well, I'm paying too much tax. actually, when you actually consider, and the chairman of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants made this point in Mombasa recently, that when you think of government expenditure in Kenya as a proportion of our nominal GDP, it's 16.4%. Whereas in other countries, you know, for example, in Rwanda, it's 58%. So,
which is a smaller country than Kenya.
It's a smaller country, but, you know, very much more is in government hands. So I think, you know, we've got to have a very balanced view. The view at the moment is, we're too deeply in debt. We're just going to be, at the end of the year, we're going to be just under 70% of GDP. But, you know, if we want roads, then we got to pay. And I think, you know, we got to understand we see the tax base really broadening through VAT. And, you know, people will say, well, you know, there's a whole lot of people in business, and yeah, the Juakali sector, you've got a lot of smaller people there, smaller, but actually earning more than the salaried employees. And the income tax, you see, we're going to see an increase in GDP of 6%. But, you know, income tax is going up, as you were saying, by 14%. So this means that, well, I don't know whether you're going to get a salary increase. I don't think I am. I'm working on a part salary at the moment. But obviously the idea that the Treasury has is that, you know, a lot of people are going to pay a lot more income tax, 14% more than last year. Admittedly, last year was a bit of a low year because, you know, looking at the actual numbers there, it was only about 3.69% more than the preceding year. But, you know, I think you've got to realize 14% increase in income tax. I think this supports what you were saying. The people who pay tax are actually going to be paying more.
No, it's proper that you have brought that issue out. And, you know, the 14% increase in income tax in a country where, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, you know, we have seen about more than 2 million people, you know, losing their income because of job losses, especially in the tourism industry, in the real estate sector, and so much. Is this winking or trying to wink in dark?
I think that's a very good question because, you know, we've always got to remember, you know, it's rather like I read the other day that the Met have forecast that between the 8th of June and the 14th of June, we're going to have heavy rain. Now, I'm very interested in that because I love trees, I plant trees, and I want to get my trees watered without me running around with buckets and, you know, but that's my exercise. This rain is not here. So, you know, the point is, will we actually have an increase in our economy? You know, you've got to remember that last year, 166 billion shillings was taken out of the economy because of our total close down of tourism. Now, we're not in control of that. The world is in control of, well, China actually is in control of that at the end of the day. You know, that Wuhan laboratory. But anyway, the thing is that, you know, we've lost that money. Now, I just hope and pray we can get back our tourism. And if that is the case, you know, the hotel industry can start it reviving again. That's absolutely essential. So I would say let's try to contain COVID version 4 up in Kisumu and in Pole for the people up there. But I think it's very, very important that we try to control COVID so that we can get back our tourism. Because if we get back that, you know, it's a very big employer of people. That will give us the possible increase in the income tax that you were rightly talking about.
And you're talking about, you know, controlling, you know, COVID-19. And, you know, this economic recovery strategy is highly benchmarked or hinged on, you know, controlling COVID-19. We have seen about 14 billion shillings going towards, you know, provision of more inoculation vaccines and, you know, providing more support to healthcare workers. But you want your economy to grow by 6.1% in 2021, 2022, and you're providing 14 billion shillings to help, you know, safeguard this growth of about 3 trillion Kenya shillings. Is this realistic, honestly?
Actually, one of the things that I noted in the budget today was that allocation of 14 billion towards the vaccine. And the global outlook, how it is right now, the recovery, even for most countries, is going to be dependent on how they're going to tackle the pandemic going forward. And for economies that are going to vaccinate massively, then they have a higher chance of recovering more than economies that are not going to vaccinate massively. So then with an allocation of 14 billion shillings for vaccination against a mass population of 40 million, Kenyans, what does that mean for Kenya? Where does it put us in the global outlook and in the mapping of Kenya, in the mapping of the globe, I'm sorry. So essentially for me, I found it as an underestimation in terms of we really cannot vaccinate everyone with the 14 billion shillings. And as well, we are also marrying the way on which we are going to be recovering. And just to weigh in on what Dr. McPhee was talking about earlier on, we are projecting our growth in GDP by 2024 to grow by 7 trillion. From 11 trillion shillings to 17 trillion shillings. Yeah. So then the question begs, what are we going to do from now onwards up until 2024 for us to bridge in a gap of 7 trillion? Because we are saying by 2024, we should be collecting 3 trillion shillings in terms of our revenue. So then all of these growths that are projected, they must be underlined by proper provisions in the law. How do we enable the informal sector to spur? How do we enable the growth? And for me, from where I sit, we have to increase the purchasing power of the common mwananchi so that manufacturers can have people to go to sell their products to. But with the current taxation of those that are employed or those that have their current purchasing power, then of course we've been reducing the purchasing power. That's my sole opinion. That
is, yeah. Okay. And you're talking about, more than 500 billion shillings, going towards debt repayment.
That's interest on debt.
That is on the interest.
Yeah, that's only interest. So, in fact, that's 27.56% of our total revenue. 27% goes just to pay the interest on the debt. I always you see, a lot of people make we got debt service. But, it's rather like, let's suppose I buy a house using a mortgage. And let's suppose that, I get just for the sake of ease, I've got a loan of 10 million shillings, let's say. Now, if I repay 1 million shillings of capital, that is part of my debt service. Now, I'll also have to pay interest on the 10 million shillings. So it may be, let's say, 12% or 14%, let's say, it's going to be 1.4 million shillings. Now, you could say, since I want to repay capital of 1 million shillings in my first year and pay the interest, I've got debt service of 2.4 million. But if I'm a common mwananchi, what I want to know is, look, first of all, how much interest do I pay? And then how much capital do I pay? And it may be that she comes along and offers me a loan at 5% instead of 14%. So I repay the whole of that and I actually take on more loans at 5%. So I think we've got to be very, very clear about this. We always talk about debt service is so much, and we've got to make a distinction between revenue expenditure, which is the interest, and then it may be that we can't, as David Indy recently, we're in a conversation together, and he said, look, in fact, countries don't actually repay their national debt. What they do is they just borrow more, and then, it's a kind of shifting. And companies do this as well. I'm in a company where we're repaying debts and we're taking on new debts. So, it's not as if that's totally unusual. But I think people cloud the issue. But mind you, we got to remember that interest on debt has gone up. It's scheduled to go up by 21% this year. And, as you say, we are thinking of having a much bigger economy where in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, we're going to have a revenue of 3 trillion shillings, which is in fact going to be only 23% of our total GDP. So, the thing is, it's going to go down. But you see, we've got to see ways by which we increase our income in Kenya. And one of the biggest problems is our more and more restrictive laws. We You know, there's a thing now, if you want to be, is it an estate agent, you've got to have some kind of a license or be a member of some body. Now, soon, if you want to be a gardener, you've got to go and do an examination in gardening. And, you know, if you want to be a farmer...
have to be a certified gardener.
You've got to be a certified gardener, and, you know, etc. Now, we've got to stop this. Please, you politicians, forget about messing around with our government, you know, the laws regulating business. Let's have a freer economy. You know, in the United States, they're actually reducing the number of, you know,
so your concern, your concern is overregulation.
Overregulation.
But I still want to pose this question to Winnie. I mean, look, I mean, when you are talking about a budget of about 3-point-something trillion Kenya shillings, you know, where about 560 billion shillings will go towards interest on debt repayment, and then at the end of the day, you also have a budget deficit of about 7.1%. I mean, that is what you would call a double whammy.
I'll be honest with you, I'm not an economics person, but for a fact and for sure I know that the numbers are pegged on the stimulus programs that are meant to spur growth and the projections in GDP growth. But only problem I have with those projections is, are we really going to meet them? Nobody ever thought that in 2020 we are going to be grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. Nobody ever knew the adverse effects that the COVID-19 pandemic was ever going to have on businesses, on our income that we are going to generate from those businesses. So in essence, when you look at our public debt, it was outweighed by the, because we had projections for 2020, but then again, it went up because of the pandemic. If you look at the GDP, it really didn't grow. We had a contraction. So then the question is, if we're planning to grow to 17 trillion by 2024, are we prepared for the hitches along the way for us to project the debt levels to go that high? So for me, I'm a little bit concerned about how we're projecting the growth, and are we realistic in the times that we're living in, that something can just pop up? I'm not sure that we are prepared for that. And if you look at, if I look at it from a macroeconomic perspective, the carrier is really trying to bring in more revenue, because if you look at this year, they have a target of collecting 2 trillion. But really, where are they going to get the 2 trillion? I can tell you for a fact and for sure, the measures that they have put in place includes in-depth audit. And if you look at one of the proposals in this year's finance bill, they want to audit as far much back as 7 years, as opposed to the 5 years that they're currently auditing. Why? Because they have one sole goal, which is to obtain more revenues over the last 7 years. And again, if you look at the budget policy statement, the carrier as well is targeting high net worth individuals, people who are moving a lot of money, purchasing land and what have you, and you know, over cross-country transactions, because they want to net those people and bring them to the tax net. So those are some of the measures that are already there, but they are looking more forward towards compliance. But then again, I want to throw this question to Dr. McPhee. Have we really utilized the big data analytics that we have, you know, the use of the iTrack system and other systems that we have for us to spur growth in the first place, to come up with the right policies that are going to create an enabling environment for us to achieve the revenue growth that we intend to have in 2024.
And I highly doubt McPhee is going to answer that question. No. Are you well versed with big data and blockchain technology?
No, the point here is we can talk about all of that, but, you know, I think the most important thing is, look, I know 3 businesses which were going to start in Kenya, which didn't start because a very senior politician in Kenya said, look, you give me 20%. That man is destroying Kenya.
20% of what?
20%. I want 20% share of this company without me paying anything. That man is destroying Kenya.
Did you report that to police?
No, because this man is too powerful for me to do this. I know a contractor who went to one of the counties in Kenya. He said, look, I'm going to put low-cost county housing in this county. He said, you start by paying me $1 million shillings. He just walked out the door. Now, this is destroying Kenya. I am educating accountants who can't get a job. Why? Because we're not growing our businesses. And we go back to the point that you're making. How are we going to get a GDP going from 11 trillion to 17 trillion unless we create new businesses here? We talk about an environment which is enabling. It enables the few people who are drinking the matunda, you know, and the point is we've got to change that. We are going the way of Venezuela. Venezuela used to be the richest country in South America. It's now the poorest. Why? Because of the president of that country and his buddies. So we got to understand how serious the future of this country is. Because I am worried. My students, it used to be you come out of my qualification and you get a job immediately, because accountants are employed right across the economy. But the point is, if the economy in terms of demand for personnel is shrinking, we have youth unemployment. So this is, you know, we've got to understand the seriousness of this. If we don't, we are helping Kenya to die.
But it's also good to remember that, I mean, you know, even as you talk about Venezuela, we also have to look at, you know, issues around, you know, trade embargoes and, you know, restrictions imposed on the economy by the United States, which has somehow contributed, you know, to the total collapse of the almost total collapse of the Venezuelan economy. But let me also get to hear your thoughts on these. You're planning to grow this economy to about 17 trillion shillings economy in about 3-4 years' time from now. The CS is talking about reducing the fiscal deficit to around 3.4% of GDP. How do you do this? Number one, by not taxing people more, and number two, by at the same time expanding the tax base? Well,
if the economy grows, if you take 20% of a bigger economy, obviously you have more income. And this is the whole idea of the public debt. If we have borrowed and that debt brings in additional income, because Kenya is a more attractive destination to visit, we get more jobs in Kenya. We have to remember that we're surrounded by very, very competitive countries, very competitive. The biggest airline in Africa is Ethiopian. We are the 4th biggest. So we have a lot of competition. They're going to build a dam. They're going to be exporting electricity to Kenya. So, you know, in fact, last month, more cargo went to Uganda through Dar es Salaam than through Mombasa. Mm-hmm. So we live in a competitive environment. So we've got to compete. We've got to be like Eliud Kipchoge. What is he doing every day these days? He's just watching TV, is he? Or traveling around the country in his helicopter? No, he's out there training. And that's why he's going to win his next race. So we've got to understand this. All of us have got to build Kenya together. And if we do that, we will come to the 17 trillion that we're talking about. But if we start stealing, you know, stealing turns people away. And the point here really is we can grow the economy like this, but all of us have got to be honest. All of us. And we got to lead by example, not by maneno. Watch your maneno, get action. Mm-hmm. And that, in fact, will transform Kenya. You know, Eliud Kipchoge is the one who gives us example here. You know, that man is a hero. He's a humble man. He doesn't want to, you know, he gets a prize in France. He receives it here on a Zoom meeting. His trainer is in France, but he's here. Why? Because he doesn't want to waste money going to France. I
think you have a special place for Kipchoge, which is a good. I mean, there's no trouble with that. But let's get back to the topic and the issue at hand here. Do you think it's possible to reduce the fiscal deficit from 7.5% now to around 3.4% in 2 years in 3 years' time?
The question is yes or no, depending on how you look at. The answer is yes or no, depending on where you choose to look at it from. From a tax perspective, I highly doubt, and I'm going to give the reasons as to why I highly doubt. Mm-hmm. If you look at the last 5 years, the taxation of this country has been uncertain. And that is one of the things that Ukuri Atani, the CS today, Honorable CS, was looking forward to address, including coming up with a national policy for taxation matters to ensure that there is certainty in businesses. Because there's no way you're going to come into Kenya as an investor and you're expecting to make an investment of 200 million shillings, and you knew for a fact and for sure you are going to get 150% investment deduction when you invest outside Nairobi and Mombasa. But then again, in the next coming year, actually in 2020, the policy changes and you can cannot actually enjoy that deduction. So what does that mean? I brought my 1 billion, I did not actually get the relief that I wanted in that year, and hence and therefore I'm starting to count losses. And you can imagine at that time I knew I could actually utilize it and have it as part of my losses, but now even when I'm a loss-making entity, I am being forced to pay 1% minimum tax, albeit I know it has been suspended by the High Court. But look at the uncertainty that we are creating in this business environment. We are actually punishing people who are coming to invest even by taxing them even when they are in a loss position. Yeah. And if you look at one of the proposals in the current finance bill, they're actually saying now there's a proposal that anyone can carry their losses into perpetuity, because they're thinking this is just a leaning on shoulder if the minimum tax provision is ruled in their favor. And if it's not ruled to their favor, then for a fact and for sure we know that you're going to revert to the whole idea of limiting the taxability of losses to the 9 years. Yeah? So ideally for me, if you ask me where we stand right now, it's highly dependent on the policies that you are going to create and even the environment that you're going to create for businesses. And currently what you've seen over the last 5 years, we are most likely going to be on a decline for revenue collection simply because we are creating an environment of uncertainties. Hence, we are not even attracting any investors coming to Kenya. And like McPhee was saying, if you look at Ethiopia, Tanzania, the question is, why are they attracting more investors? Why is Uganda looking forward in Rwanda to, to having more businesses together with Tanzania as opposed to Kenya? It's simply because of the structures that we have in Kenya, a structure that is demolishing this country other than promoting businesses. So for me, from where I stand, it is achievable if we have the right, the right structures in place. We ensure that there is full utilization of the resources without wastage, without corruption, and we mute corruption totally, and then we can for sure bridge the deficit. But things look like currently, I do not see it.
Jim, from where you see it, the CS is talking about a GDP growth of about 6.1% in the year 2021 from 0.3% in the year 2020. Is this realistic?
It is.
You look at the environment.
I'll tell you why. What you find, okay, for example, right at the moment, the UK has got the biggest growth that it's ever had for a number of years. Why? Because you've got to remember, you see, when you actually have an almost total collapse of the economy, what happens is it's easy to grow from that total collapse to a much bigger position, providing, as you mentioned, we go back to our normal, as it were, we don't have to worry about COVID-19. This is the big thing that we have to try to keep in check. And, I think it's always important to keep in mind, that, again, the strain which is present in India at the moment is affecting children and so on. But by and large, young people are very resistant to COVID-19. So you've got to remember that half of our population is under the age of 17. So now, it means really that, and then also, for example, if you take people who are out in the countryside, and 75% of Kenyans live in the countryside, what we've got to do is we've got to actually look after the 25% who live in the towns, in the Kiberas, the Mathari Valley, Korogosho, etc., etc. So if we are able to get those people vaccinated so that they're not going to spread it in the towns, I think we've got COVID beaten. That's what I feel anyway.
That's what you
feel.
And
also, we've got to, keep our masks on. And, I'm giving you a very good example I have an invisible mask at the moment, you see, you don't see it. But the thing is that, I think we've got to carry out all the precautions necessary, almost religiously, so that we make sure that we get control of this disease. If we do that, to my mind, that 6% that we're talking about is absolutely doable, as has happened in other countries, okay?
Yeah.
It's happened. The big problem here is oil is now $72, so almost $73 a barrel. A year ago, oil was $40 a barrel. So this is, you see, the problem is also when the price was very low, the government put in a few more taxes, and that is now though it's come back to bite us now. So the price of oil, of petrol is going to go even further up, and that is going to affect the cost of living. It may be that, you know, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, you know, engineers are numbered downwards, but I think it is going to be a case where...
That's one you cannot prove at this point. I'm not going to give you a platform to throw such allegations. Anyway, in the interest of time, I mean, we've been talking about this for almost 30 minutes now. We have to bring it to a close, and I'm giving each one of you 30 seconds to give Kenyans hope. I mean, we've had so much that is breaking our hearts. Time now for hope. Winnie.
I laughed because there's a lot of hope. We Kenyans are a resilient economy. We haven't been ravaged by COVID-19. What's that? I mean, if we have survived COVID-19 to that level, what is that? For me, it doesn't look as if it's much to worry us. However, what I'm going to tell Kenyans is that we have to stay true to our patriotism. We have to keep paying our taxes for economy to grow, but on the other side, we also have to demand for accountability for us to see the worth of our taxes. That's the parting shot for me.
Thank you so much, Winnie.
Whatever she says, I agree, unless she changes her mind, in fact. So, no, but I think, you know, as you say, you know, Kenyans are resilient people. But I think it's very, very important that we understand, look, you know, if we can just make our country an honest country, I tell you, the sky is the limit. The sky is the limit. Not only Kipchoge will fly the flag of Kenya everywhere, we will be able to fly the flag of Kenya everywhere. We ourselves, I have past students, some past students have been voted the best employees in their companies in the United States. Kenyans can do things, but if we be honest, we will really go places.
Very well. People, thank you so very much indeed for your input, your insight, and of course for your thoughts. We look forward for a better, brighter future for this country.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good.
Indeed.
Why don't you have a good night?
Thank you.
And keep safe.
Thank you.
Very good. Winnie Kimotho is a tax manager at PKF, while Jim McPhee is a lecturer at Strathmore University, joining us tonight to help us understand more about the budget highlights. As presented by Ambassador